Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was virtually annihilated. The U.S. Army in the Pacific wasn't in much better shape. Other than the small Army force in Hawaii, General Douglas MacArthur commanded the Philippine Army, the only other land force in the Pacific. He was in control of 2 divisions of regular troops, 16,000 U.S. regulars and 12,000 Philippine scouts. All were relatively untrained and ill-equipped. The Japanese were continuing their expansion in Southeast Asia and were posing a threat to the interest of the European colonial powers and the U.S. The Japanese attacked the Philippines, Wake Island, Guam, Malaya, Thailand, Shanghai, and Midway. When the attack did come on the Philippines, MacArthur's plan was to halt the Japanese invasion on the northern beaches of Luzon. This failed, and as a result, tens of thousands of U.S. and Philippine troops were forced to retreat to Bataan, a peninsula in central Luzon. These troops did not have enough food or medicine to sustain the fight. MacArthur moved his headquarters from Manila to the island of Corregidor and continued to send orders, never surrender. However, on April the 9th, 1942, more than 11,000 American and 66,000 Filipino soldiers were forced to surrender. It was the largest American army in history to surrender. The troops were starving, and most were stricken with malaria, beriberi, or dysentery. MacArthur had assured them that, quote, thousands of troops and hundreds of planes, unquote, were on the way to rescue them. They never arrived. The Japanese gathered them up singly and in small groups and began to march them up the Bataan Peninsula. Those who fell along the way were beaten and clubbed by their captors, often to death. 600 to 650 Americans and 5,000 to 10,000 Filipinos died on the trek. The Bataan Death March story has been told in movies, in print, and in harrowing first-person accounts. This video, too, is a Bataan Death March story, but it's unique in that it tells the story using pictures and drawings made by Ben Steele, a Death March survivor. Benjamin Charles Steele, shown here with several of his paintings, was born in Roundup, Montana in 1917, the son of ranchers. Ben graduated from high school in 1939 and in 1940 joined the Army Air Corps. In late 1941, the 19th Bomb Group, to which Ben was assigned, was stationed at Clark Field in the Philippines. At their Thanksgiving dinner that year, their commanding officer, Major Davis, told them to enjoy their dinner, since it might be a long time before they had another one like it. It turned out that he was right. On December the 8th, those stationed at Clark Field received the news that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. Later that night, Clark Field was also bombed. On Christmas Day, the soldiers at Clark Field were given the order to move to Bataan. There they were on the front lines of the battle against the Japanese. Food rations were cut in half, and medicine was scarce. The soldiers killed and ate all of their domestic animals and stripped the fruit trees. They were constantly hungry. By April the 9th, when Bataan was surrendered to the Japanese, these soldiers were in poor shape physically and were disillusioned because of the lack of support from the U.S. government. This is Ben's ID photo when he was incarcerated by the Japanese. He was 26 years old. This was one of the first drawings Ben made, capturing his memory of being taken prisoner. This shows two Americans being forced to kneel along an ammunition trail while Japanese soldiers kicked dirt on them, signing that they, the Japanese, were number one and the kneelers low as dirt. The infamous Bataan Death March is considered to be the worst atrocity committed to prisoners of war in World War II. While the rationale behind such horrendous behavior is inconceivable to many, it is explained by the mindset of the Japanese military. To their beliefs, to surrender was the ultimate shame and dishonor. Therefore, POWs were considered non-persons and did not deserve humane treatment. After capture by the Japanese, 8,000 American and approximately 40,000 Philippine troops began the march back up the Bataan Peninsula, staggering along the road for a period of 10 days to 2 weeks. In this drawing, a Japanese wipes off his bayonet after killing a POW who has fallen out. One survivor said that on the march he passed by his battalion commander, Major James Ivy. He had been tied to a tree, stripped to the waist, and was covered with many, many bayonet holes. He was obviously dead and had bled profusely. The Japanese guards were constantly harassing the marchers. They would make them line up at daylight, get in columns of fours, usually 100 to 125 men, then keep them standing at attention until the sun came up and it got real hot. Americans and Filipinos suffered the, quote, sun treatment, unquote, standing for hours while soldiers were forced to look towards the sun. Falling out meant death. Then they would start them double timing until the line got stretched out. The sick, lame, and lazy, as they were called, fell back. Then they'd close the ranks up again and keep them standing another hour in the hot sun. They were cruelly taunted by their Japanese captors, who dangled food or water within reach before knocking the men back with a bayonet thrust. This is the end of part 1. To continue, go to part 2.